We are so excited to have you all here. We're trying to get some more chairs. Anybody that is young and able and wants to come and sit on the floor, I mean, some of us are not going to do that because we would not get up. But if you're young and able and you don't mind sitting on the floor, come on up. You'll have a better view probably. Okay, but we don't want to wait too. We've got a real wonderful program. So even though you're still coming in, maybe you can kind of just talk. We just won't talk right now, okay? Can I get everybody's attention? Okay, great. Yes, if you're able, please come up and sit. That would be great. But thank you so much for coming. My name is Barbara Udit. I'm the president of the Gulf Breeze Area Historical Society, and we are so excited to have you here tonight. And we're going to get started, and if you'll bow with me, we're going to start with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just praise you for this wonderful group of people here tonight. Thank you for bringing them here, and just bless them and their families, their homes. Give everyone safe travel back to their homes. And we just praise you for this wonderful place that we live, and for the wonderful water that we have in the beaches. And I mean, we are so blessed, and we're going to get to really showcase that tonight. So thank you so much for everything you do in our lives. We love you, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And now we're going to do, if you'll rise, we're going to have a salute to the flag, and I'm going to ask you to lead it, please. This is, what's your name? I don't know your name. Fred. Fred is going to lead us into a salute to the pledge of allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, everyone. All right, and now I'm going to ask our Vice President, Jim Hutson, to come up. Okay, all right, we have to keep, we're going to start the program, so we need your attention, okay? Jim's going to introduce our speaker tonight. Jim Cox.
Everybody whistle. Everybody whistle. Everybody know how to whistle.
Hi there, I'm Jim. And
Hi, Jim.
Tonight we have Tom Hutson talking to us. Tom's been a long time, like 60-year resident of our Gulf Breeze area, and he's been surfing for over 50 years, and not just in the Gulf of Mexico, but other places as well. And it's a little awkward to introduce him this week because we've had the calmest waters the last couple of days that we've had in forever, okay? But that's going to change, as usual, okay? You know, it'll be Surf City once again. So I'd like to introduce Tom Hutson.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everyone for coming. I had no idea what to expect. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Now I'm nervous. Not really. I'm good. There's 3 chairs up here if anybody wants a chair. I see a stack of chairs back there, so you don't have to stand. I guess you guys have a table back there. Anyway, I've got a ton of pictures, and I don't know how many of you guys have put on a wedding before, but if you have a daughter and you've put on a wedding, you know that the hardest thing about doing a wedding is who not to invite. And because you want everyone to come, but it's money, and you just can't, you just got to stop somewhere. And so with this, it wasn't money, it was just time. And so I'm just laying this out before you. If I missed you as a surfer, I apologize. Maybe we do it again. I've got all kinds of images, and I'm doing this to the best of my recollection. So if some of you guys go, no, Tom, it's 1965, it was 67, then I'm sorry. And or if that picture is not the point, it's the cross or whatever, then I apologize ahead of time. But I'm going to give it my best shot, and thank you for coming. And just a real quick thing. I moved here in 1960, maybe, and the reason we came is I was born in Indiana. My dad worked for a company called Mutual of Omaha, and he had to make a decision. He could either go to the headquarters and climb the ladder, the corporate ladder, and go to Omaha, Nebraska. And we almost did that, but I'm so grateful that we didn't do it. and we came here, and the reason we came here is because I had an uncle who was stationed in the Marines in 1959-ish as a flight student. And my Uncle Don and Aunt Bev were here. And a few years ago, before my dad passed away, he's telling me, we had all these talks, you have these heart-to-heart talks, and I knew he was gonna die, and he's telling me all this stuff. And one of the things he told me is that, well, when his brother, my Uncle Don, when he was in the military, he was best friends with another young flight student. With him, it was Don and Joyce Rumsfeld. And if you're over 40, 50, you'll know that Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense during the Gulf War. And I was real impressed with the way he handled the press, because he was just no nonsense, and they'd ask him stupid questions and he would just put them in their place. So I went online, and this has nothing to do with this, okay? I went online and I sent him, I found an address for him, so I sent him an email, and I told him who I was. I told him that my aunt had just passed away. I told him about what my dad told me about him, and I heard nothing. But 6 weeks later, we were driving, Susanna and I, my wife here, we were driving up to, I think, Virginia or Maryland, and I get this email on my phone, and it was from Donald Rumsfeld. And he sent me the most gracious note and just thanked me for the kind words and told me my uncle is a very fine airman. My uncle was killed a few years later in a plane crash over Georgia, and I don't know what happened. But so anyway, that's just a little bit of a background. And so we came here to Gulf Breeze. We lived in Warrington for about a year with my grandparents, and I'm going to show you the pictures. But my grandparents moved down here probably late 50s. And they started a hardware store called Hutson Hardware on New Warrington Road. And the reason they came down was because my uncle was here. So my dad thought, well, instead of going to Omaha, Nebraska, let's go down to Pensacola. So one day, we lived with them in a 2-bedroom, one bathroom house in Warrington. And my parents just took a Sunday afternoon drive, and they left Warrington. They went through downtown Pensacola, and they went across this long 3-mile bridge, and they discovered this fantastic place called Gulf Breeze in like 1959 or 60. So they go, oh, let's see if we can pull it off and buy a house here. So they scraped everything they had together, they got a loan, and they bought a house on 112 Gilmore Drive for $12,000 across from Richard Montgomery. Yes. And then a few years later, they thought, we're really going to go for it. Let's go big. Let's go bigger. So they moved to 2 Gilmore, which is near the corner of Fairpoint Gilmore, and they bought a house for not $12,000, but $12,500. And then about 8 years later, they totally went for broke, and they found a house on High Point Drive, 10 High Point on Woodland Bayou in 1973 when I was in high school, and they spent $37,000, and I think it was a big stretch. And the one way they did that is they bought a lot on Cordova Street, either Cordova or I think it was Cordova, but right across the street from my best friend's house, J.P. McNeil. The McNeil family lived there. And so we bought it, but I think what we did is I think we sold it for $5,000 to get some of the money to buy this $37,000 waterfront house. So anyway, with that in mind, let's go to this slide. And Vic Bennett's here tonight, and this house, this house right here, this was on Facebook not too long ago, and I recognize this house is a house I know that Mike Stephen lived in, and his roommate, Vic. And I don't know if you lived there the whole time, Vic, but Mike told me he lived there for 5 years, and he had a really interesting story. He grew up in Gulf Breeze, and he got out of hip school, and his stepmom said, Mike, it's time to spread your wings. I was like, what? So it's time to get out on your own, buddy. And so he had a little Volkswagen hatchback, those small station wagons they had back in the day. He loaded all his possessions in it. He drove across the bridge thinking, where am I going to go? So he goes to the beach, and he drives up to this house, and his friend, Randall King's dad's car was there, and I think Randall King's grandfather, I believe.
Built the house. He built the house.
Okay, so his grandfather built the house, thank you. So Mike thought, well, maybe Randall's here, so he pulled up, and just to say, hey, what's going on? And they're putting in carpet and stuff. And they go, well, we're gonna rent this house. He goes, really? How much? He goes, well, we're gonna try to get $100 a month for it on the golf here. Mike goes, I'll take it. And so Mike lived there for 5 years with no heat and no air conditioning, and he surfed all the time back here, right across, behind his house. And he said in the wintertime when he'd come in, they didn't have heat, so they would turn on the oven and the stove as high as they could and just hover around it. Warm. So anyway, so that's the first one. Now,
Tom, thanks so much for being the historian, man. We appreciate you big time.
thank you, it's just fun, I love it. I just have a passion for, I don't know, surfing around here. But anyway, I always thought the story was that surfing started here around the late 50s, early 60s, when some of the Navy guys that were transferred from the west coast of California were stationed here, and they went surfing. And some of you guys may know the name David Stone, and I hope I have this accurately, but David Stone's brother Dan was older than him, and he was a lifeguard at the beach. And one day he was up on a stand, and he sees this guy coming down with a surfboard, and he knew how to surf. And this was probably 59 or 58, something like that. And he ran down and said, look, I will pay you if you'll teach me how to surf, how to do this. And so anyway, so I'd always thought that that's how we got started. Well, someone sent me this. This is from 1941 right here. And it was a guy named Johnny Swindell posted it. And then I was really amazed. I thought, gosh, that looks like, I think that's Pensacola. It said it was Pensacola. And so I got his mother's phone number, Mrs. Swindell, and I called her, and she was super gracious. And she told me that her brother, I think her brother, was a photographer for the local news journal, which I assume was the Pensacola News Journal at the time. And he was taking a lot of pictures back then for the news journal and his own pictures. And he took this off of the pier. And so then I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe we didn't even have a pier, then maybe this is fake. So I looked up the history of our beach and our pier, and we've had piers since 1930 something. So I do think that this is our beach, and so that makes me think that we actually had surfing, let's see, 51, 61, 71, 81, 91, 2002. So 80 years or so, over 80 years, which is pretty cool.
And I think it was just the Pensacola News before
Oh.
the last article I saw from 1960, it was just Pensacola News,
Pensacola
so no
News.
journal yet. But
Okay,
anyway, just
all
a
right.
side note, us historians.
Well, now we know. So anyway, and what's interesting about this board? These boards were made out of like a plywood, and they were hollow inside. They called them Tom Blake boards. He was a guy from California, from Wisconsin, that moved to California, became a good surfer, and was a pioneer in the sport. And I think they called them kook boxes. I don't know why, but so some of you older guys maybe that surf could tell me if you know. But anyway, so there's a local guy named Wendell McGahey, and he was coming home one day from whatever he was doing, and he sees a garage sale, and he pulled up to the garage sale. He got out, looked around, and they pulled out a board that looked just like this. And they said, oh, we have this surfboard for sale. And he goes, how much is that? And they said a price, and they go, look, it's been under our house for decades. Our son was in the Navy and or in the military or whatever, and he left it here. And so they gave him a price, and Wendell goes, I don't have any money. I just stopped by to see what's going on and say hi. And they go, well, please just take it. We're tired of it. That board has got to be worth a lot of money. Serious money. And so I wonder if that's that board. Okay, so moving on. My grandparents came down and started this store, Hutson Hardware. And how many of you guys are familiar with the Hutson Hardware and Surf Shop? Okay, a bunch of you guys, okay. So this was actually across the street and down closer to Mobile Highway. So a few years later, my grandparents sold it to the Waters family, and they started, well, this is Jack and Louise Waters. Yeah, Brian Waters' parents. And so this is the store. If you look closely right there, whoops, you surfers can see that there's a Skip Fry surfboard right there, if you look closely. Anyway, the Waters family owned it and had it for several years. They made it to a surf shop, and I think what happened was some of the guys from the base down the road that were surfers got together with started hanging around there and said, hey, what if we make surfboards? And so they started a factory, and I'm kind of ad-libbing there. I'm not quite sure if that's exactly how it happened. But anyway, And so, you know what, since we're there with this, I want to show you something that JB was nice enough to donate. This board is really heavy, and it's got Hutson, the Hutson logo on it, Hutson surfboards. And if you look down here in the tail, it says Bob Cooper. Now, Bob Cooper was a guy back in the 60s. He was a famous California surfer. He was very good, but he was a bit of a beatnik. He was, before hippies, you had beatniks. And he went against the grain where everyone else was getting into drugs. He didn't do drugs. Everyone else was getting into Eastern religions. He became either a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness. I'm not sure which. But he just went in a total different direction. And he had a surfboard model, and I'm thinking it was with a company called Maury Pope. But I talked to, I saw this hanging up when Interlight had a shop on the pier, I guess last year, year before, and I noticed it had Bob Cooper on it. I was so fascinated because it's a big deal to have a guy who back in the 60s was very famous. He just died about 2 years ago. But anyway, he shaped this board, and the story is that he flew from Australia where he had moved, one of the first surfer guys from California to move to Australia. He flew back to do a promo for his surfboard model at this, I think, Maury Pope surfboards. He did a loop around the United States to all his dealers, and he stopped at his last stop, which was Hutson Surf Shop. And so Jack and Louise, they were very, as far as I know, very conservative, hardworking people. They weren't wild at all. And so one night they took Bob Cooper out, and they said, well, let's just take him out to a nice dinner. So you guys are familiar with Seville Square? Well, it used to be called Rosie O'Grady's complex, and they took him out there, and they bought dinner, and apparently they had a beer or two. And so the next morning, for those of you guys who know Brian Waters, Brian was just a little kid who was eating his cereal at the table, and he heard his parents talking, and he did the conversation, and Brian's so low-key, it was funny the way he did it. But he goes, the wife, Louise, goes, Jack, do you realize that we offered to buy Bob's hearse for $300 last night? He goes, oh, we did? And he goes, yeah. And it's quiet, and Brian's eating his cereal, and then she goes, Jack, we don't have $300. So Brian just quietly taking it all in, and he had a paper route or something. He was saving his money. And so he goes, Mom, I've got $300. I'll give you the money. So he took his little paper passbook thing, and his mom drove him to the bank, and he goes in and withdraws $300. And they had this hearse. They put Hutson Surf Shop on it, I guess, and had it for a few years. So anyway, that's the story behind that. I keep telling stories, we'll never get out of here. This is a pretty epic picture, and this introduces to you guys that are not familiar with this guy here is Scott Bush. He was one of the early pioneers of surfing in Pensacola. He was one of the guys that made some of the early Hutson surfboards, and they went from Hutson, if I understand correctly, to Unit 4, and because there's 4 guys working on it, according to Beezer Turner, what I think is what he said. And then they went to Islander, which is a really big local surfboard company in the 70s and the 80s around here. So anyway, Scott Bush, this picture this is Highway 98, kind of like if you're at Harbor Town and you're looking towards the off-ramp coming off the beach, which is right there. And so this is back before, way before Harbor Town. There's a little block building there, and Scott Bush had a surf shop there. And I think it was just called Scott Bush Surf Shop or Challenger Surfboards, which is a big company back in the day. And so this is Yancey Spencer, this is Beezer Turner, and this is Pastor John Spencer, Neil's dad, right here. And so they were on the Challenger Surf team. Okay, so now there's more coming. This is Scott Bush, and this is him making a surfboard behind the Hutson Surf Shop, a hardware store on New Warrenton Road. And this would be probably 1960. Herb, what do you think?
3 or 4, probably.
Okay, this is really interesting. This is probably, according to Tom Groh, Tom Groh is in his 70s, maybe late 70s, and I think he started surfing in 59, I think. He's put in more hours than probably most anybody. This is his brother, And Tom said, whoops, I'm sorry. Tom says that this was the first board ever actually produced in Pensacola. He said it was terrible and it fell apart. This is a really cool bathtub Porsche, I think they call it. I have another photo that I couldn't find. But this is Tom's brother, his older brother, and unfortunately, I think he was killed in a helicopter crash in the military a few years after this. So anyway, that would supposedly be the first surfboard. And back then, they had these, what they call those? Iron Cross, yes,
Maltese.
yes.
Yeah.
Maltese Cross, yes,
Maltese
okay.
Cross.
Tom Grove, this is the outside of the Pensacola Pier, and Tom has been surfing 60 some odd years, I'm guessing. I don't think he surfs as much as he used to, but he said this was the best day he ever saw on Pensacola Beach. So, and this is another one of the same day. Okay, so now we jump around a little bit. So, Scott Bush had the surf shop there where Harbor Town is, okay? And then about 50 yards down, when Yancey was on the team, and Yancey was became a very good surfer. So, okay, to back up a little bit, Yancey started surfing in 1965, and he was 15 years old, because I think he was born in 1950, and he was on Scott Bush's team. A series of events happened, and then he met a guy named Skip Savage, and Skip's coming up here in a minute. But Skip, oh, that's Skip right there, actually, right here. This is, I think, Ken Roos's wedding, that's Ken. And there's Yancey, and this is Robin Martin, I believe. And so Skip, he was a large Greg Knowles surf shop, just dealership up in Delaware, of all places, on the coast of Delaware. And I don't know, JB would know better than me, but somehow all the guys from here got to know Skip, and they some of them ended up living in a shop in the summer, because we have, like was just said earlier, our surf can be terrible in the summer, non-existent, and super hot, if you haven't noticed. And so Delaware was cooler, and there was a lot of surf up there. And so anyway, so the guys got to know Skip. Long story short, Skip came down here because he really embraced everybody and he liked them, and he started a surf shop, and it was called Greg Knowles Surf Shop. And so if you're looking, if this is the curve going to the beach, Scott Bush's shop was here, well then Skip, and hopefully I have all this correct, he started a little teeny shop, which you're going to see in a minute, just a stone's throw away, and started the Greg Knowles Surf Shop. And so, and I could be off a little bit. Herb, you can tell me, was Scott there first before Yancey had that shop?
I believe he was.
Okay, I saw that. So anyway, they had the shop. Skip came down, I think he was here for a winter, and you have to think, just forget what you think about Gulf Breeze right now, and think about 60 some odd years ago, and it was much slower traffic. It was very small. Surfing was very small. And so Skip would stay in that shop all day. It was like 10 by 10, and he would sell a bar of wax, and it was a quarter back then. And he finally said, guys, I'm done. You, Yancey and Ken, Ken Roos, can take over this shop. And then again, I'm kind of filling in some details here that kind of making them up as I go. Not making them up, but what I did have.
Call it what you want to.
Anyway, so after a while, Ken Roos bowed out, and I think from what I read, I wrote on an earlier Facebook post, someone told me that he sold his share to Yancey for $250. And so, does that seem accurate? Okay, it works. Here's some of the guys. And is this Johnny? No. What's the name of this shop? Who?
Workman.
Gary Workman. Okay, this was a shop, and I'm not sure the details. This was probably prior to Scott in the 60s. So if Yancey right here started surfing in 65, this had to be later 60s. But that's a guy named Brad English. That's Ken Roos. This is a young guy named Buddy Capel. That's John Spencer. And this, I guess, was Gary Workman right here. Anyway, so these are some of the guys at Yancey's paddle out on Pensacola Beach when he passed away. So this is Skip Savage, the guy he came over to be a part of it. This is Scott Shepard, who just spoke. This is Brad English, who sadly passed away about 4 years ago or so. John Spencer, Herb Turner, who's here with us, and then Beezer Turner, his brother. So this is like 50 years later or something like that. Okay, this is Skip Savage. This is him, I don't know if that's Costa Rica or what. But, so Skip Savage, actually, if Skip never came here, surfing would be different. I'm not sure how, but he kind of brought it, gave a platform. So Yancey ended up with the shop, and, okay, I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, Skip had a big part of the early days. Okay, here we are. This is the early shop, and here's Interlight, and this is a painting of Interlight by Terrace Newman's wife. You can see this little sign here. This sign was always here on the beach, and the beach is right there. It always said Tiki House. And okay, after when Greg Noll went out of business in California, so Yancey, I'm skipping a part of this. Yancey actually got a model under the Greg Noll label, and he had his own model called the Greg Noll Seeker, and he actually made a royalty off every board that was sold under his Seeker model. And so, anyway, so they changed the name to New Era, and they became a dealership for these boards right here, which are called Blue Cheer surfboards. And that became a big thing. And Yancey was quite he was very charismatic, if you didn't know him, and he was such a talented surfer. All the young guys, we all looked up to him, and kind of whatever he bought, whatever he rode, we would ride. And so this little 10x10 store was where it all started. And then if you see this car right here coming in, I don't know how many of you guys remember it, but I think this was like the reception office of a little motel, little cottages back in the day. And there's a U-shaped circle with like a little rock or shell road that came back up to 98. And there were some abandoned little cottages back behind it. And it was, it's just weird to think that real estate prices now, that they were just abandoned and no one cared. And so anyway, I think I might, okay, this is right next to one of those cottages, I'm 99% sure. And this is, I don't know what they're doing, but this is a Greg Noll Seeker model.
We know.
I think I know.
They're waxing it.
This is Ken Roos, this is a guy named David Lynch, Yancey Spencer, and this is a guy named Jerry Blank. Years later, Jerry Blank started a shop called Joe Buck Surf Shop, which we'll get into in a little bit. So anyway, so that's behind the shop. Now, does anyone recognize this building?
Yeah.
Bay Window Deli.
Joyce Ceramics.
Joyce Ceramics before that, and then apparently it was this Dixie Court, so I don't know, maybe this was part of the complex, but what I just showed you, the Interlight was, the little, the Greg Noll Surf Shop, New Era Surf Shop was right over here, and it eventually became Interlight. We'll go into that in a second. And so this was just, I found this, and this is the place.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what, let's do that. The way Interlight became Interlight, and then we'll go into this a little bit. Interlight, okay, did any of you guys see the Jesus Revolution movie about a year, or last year, or recently? It was really good, and it told the story of the whole Jesus movement that happened back in 1971-ish, and it just started in California, it seems like, and it just kind of rolled across the country. And so Yancey shares testimony often about his story about becoming a Christian, and so in a nutshell, he was up in Virginia Beach, and he went to this church called Rock Church, and he accepted the Lord, he became a Christian, and so he came back and he started this church. He thought, well, I got to name the shop something different. So he named it Inner Light, because it was like the way Yancey saw it, he had this inner light that, we have as a Christian emanates from you, I guess. So anyway, so that's how he got the name Inner Light. And, okay, so that gives you that. Let's just keep going. Okay, this is something that, that Skip Savage, the guy, you can see it, whoops. You can see his name right here. Skip, I think he had a pretty slow day at work, so he did this. It'd be crazy. And this was the team and their ratings. And back then it was all amateur, and they had ratings of 3A, which is a high, and then 1A was kind of beginner, and then 2A was kind of climbing the ranks, and 3A. So you see like Buddy Capel, Jerry Blank. Jerry Blank has been in Southern California for years teaching karate, and I think he's taught a lot of celebrities and celebrities' kids karate. Beezer Turner, who is one of the best surfers ever from this area, who lives in San Diego, and he's, I think, 70 years old, he still surfs. Brad English, who is a great surfer, Brad passed away about 4 years ago or so. John Spencer, who was on the team, he's Yancey's younger brother, and he became a pastor about 40 years ago, and he has the Coastline Calvary Chapel. Glenn Curl was a great surfer. He passed away probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. Herb Turner, who's here with us tonight, right there. And then Yancey Spencer, Ken Bruce, and Robin Martin. Interesting story, Herb, is that there was a great surfer here named John Russell back in the day. And before I knew him, John passed away of heart failure a couple years ago. He was an awesome guy. He had a great website called Surf Smooth. All the surfers loved it. And he did surf reports. He videoed everyone, which they really loved. And so he told me a story about, he was also a really good musician, this guy, John Russell. And John decided back in the summer of love, 1967-ish, he went to San Francisco where it was happening. And so he went there and he stayed there for, I don't know how long, a year, 2 years, whatever. And he came back and he said when he left, the hot kid that was ripping was a guy named Herb Turner. And when he came back, he couldn't believe it, that when he came back, the name was Yancey Spencer, who he had known he was a good surfer, but I think what happened, and Herb, you can correct me, but it seems like you were more mellow than Yancey, and he was just so driven, just driven from day one. And so Yancey kind of became the guy, and then he started the shop, and on and on and on. Okay, these are some of the guys, these are all the guys I looked up to when I was 13. So these guys, here's your names. John Spencer, some of the guys, Jackie Seal, Brad English, Glenn Curl, Todd Hughes, I think was right. Let's see. I can't even remember which one he is. But anyway, what's that?
Blob, whoever it
Oh, I think that's him right there. Yes. It's Scott Shepard, who's here tonight, Beezer Turner, Buddy Capel. Okay, when Yancey had his model, this is Scott Shepard, and that's Brad English, out behind one of the houses. Do you know whose house this was, Scott?
No, I can't remember what it was.
I'm pretty sure it's on the Gulf.
The surf was flat that day, so we didn't have anything else to do.
Well, this is one of Yancey's prototypes, and from the stories I heard, Yancey was 5 years older than me, so I was just a kid. But these are the guys I really looked up to, and I love the picture because it's the old Pensacola Beach.
Yeah.
All the houses on ground level that have all disappeared now.
Them cinder blocks are still.
Yeah. Well, some of them are still there. Anyway, so back in the day, you didn't have computers and you couldn't just draw templates for a surfboard. So I think what Yancey had to do is talk to Greg Noll in California and probably do mail letters back and forth with drawings and stuff. And so from the story I heard is that he sent a couple models back, but I think it was tough to get the right model. They didn't work that great. Is that right?
2 or 3 models and that was near the end.
Okay.
Around in a diamond.
Okay, all right. Well, so anyway, it was just not as high tech as now. Speaking of Scott Shepard, this is Scott. This is that same day what we just saw where Scott's holding the board up. This is Scott surfing 50 years apart. So back then and now.
Wow.
Dark hair, gray hair. But he's still doing it.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay, this is Scott again, that same day, this previous. This is Ken Roos, you saw in that other picture. And Ken was, he ran the pre-Interlight shop back in the days under the Greg Noll Surf Shop. And he surfed till a few years. It was really sad. He seemed very healthy, but he got a melanoma in his scalp, and it went to his brain. He died about, I don't know, 2 years ago, a couple years ago, and died quickly. That was a shame. Okay, this is Ken Roos right here, and this is Charlie Schuler. I think pretty positive that's Charlie in Navarre. They were longtime surf buddies. Okay, this is Stan Roos, Sea-Dog, Jerry Blank, and Scott Shepard. I think this is at Yancey's paddle out. And since then, Sea-Dog, John Seelak, he passed away, and Kid Roos passed away, which you mentioned. Okay, and this is back to that other picture of at the Gary Workman shop. I think this is in Brownsville, actually, at a motel. They took the front office off Cervantes. What's that?
It was the Deluna Hotel.
Oh, the Deluna, okay.
Yeah.
There, all right, there we go. Back to the wedding again. This is Ken Roos surfing in 1972, I believe. Most of the younger guys knew Ken as a longboarder. This is when he was still riding shortboards. And this is down,
Wow.
you see these houses, and this is down the last houses on the beach. Like now you have Portofino right here, and you know, a lot of stuff. But these are, God, what's that area called now? Well, this, I think this would be on the, these are probably brand new houses back in '72. So anyway, okay, now, this is an early Yancey Spencer picture, and you just can't do this without including a good bit about Yancey, because he was such a significant force in Pensacola surfing. So, Yancey, okay, this is, if you forget everything else I'm talking about, just think about this. This is the part that's the most important to me. In my opinion, Pensacola as a surfer in 1970-ish didn't even exist in the surfing world. No one knew about it. You know, it just didn't exist. Yancey was so driven and so talented, and he happened to have some good photographers in the area named Dave Skelton, who we're going to show, and Tony Caruso from Fort Walton, and they were taking pictures and putting them in the magazines. And so some of you, we're going to show a pic. Well, I'm sorry, I keep jumping ahead. Okay, so this is Yancey and Beezer Turner back around the same era, 72 or 3. This is, whoops, an old, just by the boards, real thick single fins. And with their Caton board shorts, our beautiful golf right behind them. This is Surfer Magazine. This is Yancey. Yancey just has such a beautiful style. And something that I learned, and I feel really honored, I guess, or privileged, is that there's guys here, like I think Herb was a very stylish surfer, and Beezer was super stylish, and Yancey was super stylish. As I got older and started traveling, I would go to these different coasts, and I had a job as a sales rep where I went to surf shops for decades, and I surfed all over the area, all over the state, the East Coast, and all that. And I would see some really good surfers, and if you don't surf, this won't make any sense to you, but there's guys that could just get the job done, but they didn't have any style. But my generation grew up under these guys with this amazing style, and surfing is just, to me, it's like a dance. And so we were very fortunate to have some very stylish surfers in the area to try to emulate. This is Yancey and Beezer up on the pier. Dave Skelton took this picture, and back then, nobody had any money, and there wasn't much of a surf industry. So Dave Skelton told me that they got together sometimes, and they just said, well, let's just take pictures and send them to the companies and see if we could be in an ad. So they took Surfer House wetsuits that I guess were probably in Yancey's store. They modeled them and took several pictures, and they were in a full-page ad next to the pier. So they made a little money, and they got some exposure. These are several pictures of Yancey, just different ones that I posted this on Facebook before. Just really talented, super stylish. This is from Surfer Magazine. This is Yancey, Harry Allen, and Brian Waters, and back then there now turn off your mind from what you experience today. Back then there was no cell phones, there's no internet, and surfing, all surfing was, as far as the media, there were 2 magazines. There was Surfer and Surfing, and back in the day they came out every 2 months. And so to be in the magazine, which this was just giant to my young friends. And so we studied these magazines, and we read them and studied them. We go to friends' houses and talk about them. And I can still look at pictures now I see on the internet or an old magazine, and I remember the caption, but anyway, to see these guys or any local guys in the surf magazine, the Surfer was like the Bible of the sport, basically. And so we were just so thrilled. And something that happened that I think really helped Pensacola surfing because of Yancey and Beezer and some of the guys that got in the magazines, excuse me, was that we almost, this is my view, it's almost like we had this inferiority complex when we travel, because you're from where? We're from Pensacola. Where's that? Are there waves there?
No.
But after a few years, when Yancey started getting the magazine, and Beezer got some pictures in the magazine, and people started realizing, oh, there is surf there. And so then we go to East Coast, or we go to California, or go to Hawaii, or whatever. Oh, you're from Pensacola, you must know Yancey Spencer. And everything Pensacola was Yancey Spencer, but he paved the way for us. And it was a huge thing. It sounds silly now, maybe, but for us young guys, it was huge. This is, if you wonder why there's a statue of Yancey, this is actually snow around him. So, Yancey, he's not a politician, he wasn't a war hero, but he's got a statue up there. But in some ways, Yancey kind of single-handedly put Pensacola on the map as a surf place. And if it wasn't for Dave Skelton and Tony Crusoe, they were part of the equation too, because they took pictures of Yancey and submitted them to the magazines. And so it was just a neat time to be a surfer in Pensacola Beach. Some more pictures of Yancey. JB with Yancey. You can see some big waves in the background. You see the offshore wind, the big storm surf. Okay, here's something. See this surfboard in front of you? This surfboard is this surfboard, and this is a great story. And I'm piecing it together the best I can from talking to Yancey himself and stuff. But Hank Warner, who was a partner with Yancey back in the days when they made this surfboard called, if you see it, it says Atlantic Ocean Surfboard. This is that same board before it got refurbished. And so this is in 1971 or 2, and there was a contest on the North Carolina coast. I think they did that in Wrightsville Beach. And get this, the prize money was $1,000. And for that $1,000, surfers traveled from California, the best surfers in the country, from California, all over the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, and they went to go in this contest. This guy who was with them is a guy named Dale Dobson, and he was from San Diego, he was kind of sort of godlike as a surfer, and David Nueva or Nueva, however you want to say, he was godlike, he was there. Well, Yancey, prior to going to this contest, he had that little teeny shop that you saw earlier. Someone broke into the shop, he just got 10 new boards. Someone broke into the shop, stole 10 boards. And I could be off, I'm sure I'm off, but I'm guessing back then the surfboards were maybe $100 each wholesale. So he lost at least $1,000. And I remember talking to Yancey about it, and he wasn't sure if he should even go. He was 22 years old, 21, 22, had a young family. He was married, and he had this young business that was fragile. A young business is fragile. And so he wondered, should I even go? Is it the right thing to do? Well, he decided to go for it. So he drove up to North Carolina, and he started winning heats. He started beating this guy, and this guy, and this guy. And this surfboard is called an egg. And Hank Warner shaped it. This is the board, and it's called an egg because it's shaped like an egg. But the thing about it is that the height behind is wide, and Yancey was really light on his feet. And he was so good at just taking off in the teeniest way and gliding across nothing. And in surfing, if you're heavier and you don't do it right, you're going to bog down and stall. But Yancey on that board beat person after person after person. He got to where it's going to be the final against this guy. I'm pretty positive. And Yancey, of course, was nervous. He gets in the van with this friend of his named Claude Codgen. And at the time, Claude Codgen was a very strong Christian believer, had been a super famous surfer in the 60s. And they prayed together. And Yancey was calm then. He went out and he won the heat. He won the $1,000. And he drove back. And then made even better is I think someone snitched on the thieves, and the police found out where these boards were, and I think they were up in someone's attic, is that so right? Yeah. In the attic, so he won the $1,000, he got all the boards back, Interlight was saved, and so, I mean.
Amen. God works in mysterious ways.
So it's possible that Yancey could have thrown in the towel and said, I'm done with this, I'm just gonna get a regular job. Probably not. But that could have been the demise of Interlight back in, in a very early time. So to me, this surfboard is super significant because I don't know that was that much prize money or more than that in any contest prior to that, especially domestically. I think even in Hawaii, like some of the big contests they had back then, they would win a bar of wax and a trophy. I mean, it's so tiny back then. But Yancey beat everybody, and that kind of cemented his name as a force in the surfing world. But there's something else that happened. Okay, I think this might have been an ad. He looks like he's really cold with his fist like that. I don't know where the dune was. It makes me think Fort Pickens, but back in 1972, we were on the regular dunes. I don't know. Okay, to me, this is huge. So, back in the day, if you were from Florida, if you were from the Gulf, you got so little respect in the surfing world. And if you were lucky, you might get a novelty article or a little section in the magazine. They might, in the little notes that people write about gossip in the world, they might stick a teeny little picture of you, especially if you're from the Gulf Coast. Well, Yancey went out surfing, and I don't know if this will make sense to you if you're not a surfer, but back then the boards were difficult to maneuver, so they would experiment with fin sizes, and with little teeny fins, you could do like 180s, you could take off fin first, and the fin would catch, you could flip your board around, and sometimes do 360s and stuff. So that was the thing. Well, this day, Yancey was out on a wide board, and he put a little teeny fin in the board, and he went to do this big bottom turn on a real clean day, and it created this perfect like hedge of water. And it's kind of condensed here, but if you saw it in the magazine, it was a 2-page spread of this young guy I think the picture was taken in 1969, so Yancey would have been about 19. And so I think the world took notice. One, that there's this young guy named Yancey Spencer who was a force to be reckoned with, who could surf. Two, that there really were surfers in Pensacola that could surf. And three, that Pensacola actually had surf. So that was just, I know it sounds goofy with the whole world, what's going on and all the important stuff, but that in our little world was just giant. And so anyway, and that was actually before I started surfing, but I just remember seeing the magazine and when I started in 1970. So I think that was a huge thing. This is Yancey in the 80s, I think, at a contest in Malibu. That's ESPN interviewing him. Okay, let me tell you one more thing. Hank Warner shaped this board. This goes back to what I was telling you about the Jesus Revolution, and it was actually a big part of the surfing story back here. Hank Warner, who was he goes shaped by H. Warner. It had Yancey Spencer on the top with the Holy Spirit of Jesus. So the whole Christian thing kind of permeated the surfing world. And I hope JB's okay with this, but these three guys had a huge impact on this area. And these are three brothers, if you don't know who they are. That's JB, Councilman JB, Interlight proprietor, and maybe soon to be mayor. This is John Spencer, who has been a Calvary Chapel pastor for 40 years. John's right here, I'm sorry. And this is Yancey. And I'm just saying this because I've heard them say this before, and I know they all agree, but I've heard them say that if it wasn't for their experience with the Lord, they'd probably all be in jail. but they all made such a great contribution to our culture here.
Yeah.
And the thing that's interesting, I don't want to preach, but it's like I think that's carried down Christian surfers, and there was a thing called the Board Riders at Calvary Chapel. It's a skateboard ministry still going on, but it's given a really neat influence to the young kids. There's so many bad directions you can go in. And I traveled around, I used to go to beach towns everywhere, and there's just something different about Pensacola. Okay.
It started with the inner light, Tom.
Right. Here's the family that surfs together, stays together. There's JB, and then Nancy and John, I believe. And so it's unusual to get them all in the same wave. Do you know how long ago that was? JB's cut them all off. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is John Spencer. Look at this. I love the emptiness on the beach. Do you remember this tower down by where you come near Portofino, sort of? Yeah, I love that.
7-Eleven was on.
Dave Skelton took this from the water back in about 72-ish, 3-ish. This is JB. Now, does anyone know why JB's last name is Schluter and his brother's names are Spencer? Has anyone been confused by that? Does anyone care?
Yes, tell us, Tom.
JB. Yeah. No, JB's mom ended up being divorced. She married Schluter, and JB was so young, correct, that you were adopted by Ernie Schluter. So you took on that name, okay? And John and Nancy were already up and out, I guess. Okay, just a random picture. This is there's JB, John, Nancy. That's actually me, not JB. This was just some driftwood down at Point at Fort Pickens, and this is you just hang up the wetsuits, wait for the surf to change or get better. And anyway, so that was probably around 73 or 4. This is Beezer Turner at the pier in Pensacola, and it's probably around 75, 6, 7, somewhere in there. This is Beezer. During where they're going to do that, we're trying to get some ad shots. Beezer with the Gordon Smith report. Here's a young Beezer.
Oh,
The young Beezer. Beezer surfed so good, and Herb was a little bit. I've heard so much about Herb, but I think I came in a little bit late to the scene, so Herb was kind of already, I don't know, I just didn't see Herb surfing that much. But I've heard so much about your style and how good you were, so I can only refer to Beezer here. This is Beezer, I think it's at the cross, but I'm not positive. Young Beezer, that's Glenn Curl next to him, and this is that guy Skip Savage that came down and started the Greg Knoll Shop. Okay, here's another Beezer. Okay, this is these are the photographers. This is Dave Skelton. He's still living in Pensacola now. This is Tony Caruso, who's from Fort Walton, and he lives in Atlanta now. But these guys were the photographers, and if it wasn't for them, Pensacola wouldn't have any of the exposure that it did. And so here they were in Mexico waiting to catch a ferry, and they were 4 days waiting for this ferry, and their food was getting awfully low. I think they're showing what Tony was going to do if they ran out of food. So anyway, that's Tony Caruso. This was in an ad for Caton Board Shorts. I think he's got his water housing there with him. But Tony's a really good guy. Took some great pictures that were published in magazines. It ended up over time where Tony was the guy who worked for Surfing Magazine, and Dave was the guy that worked for Surfer Magazine. Okay, this is Dave Skelton, and this is young Dave here, and this is Dave had a shop. You guys know where the Mattress World in Gulf Breeze, and there used to be the Benson Building there, and so so that used to be the Benson Building, and Dave, this is in Dave's shop called Buck Surfing Sport.
Bucks.
A guy named Jerry Blank started in 74 or 75, had it for a short time, and then sold it to Dave. And so Dave kind of slowed down his photography, became a competitor with it, right? And something I was going to say, it'll come up in a minute. Okay, this is Dave. Dave was so proud this is Dave about a year ago. He was so proud. There's a magazine called the Surfer's Journal. Most of the print stuff has faded away. Surfer Magazine, Surfing, so many of them. But the Surfer's Journal still stands. It's probably the most prestigious surfing publication in the world now. And Dave always wanted to be a part of it. And this is an article on Sterling Spencer. And Dave got a photo that he took of, he took this one. This is Beezer, JB, Falbo and Yancey were kind of pretend posing for an ad. And so anyway, Dave took that, he was so proud that he got that in the magazine. So, this is Dave again. This is Dave. Okay, what's interesting about this is in front of Dave's shop at the Benson building. And back in the mid-70s, the traffic was, where this was a pullover lane, like you're looking towards what would now be, like, you know, where Baskin Robbins is in that shopping center? So the stoplight's really right here, say, and Dave's just out waiting for customers, and you could pull in on the side, this third lane, and just, it was a parking lane, which now you can never do that. And the old cars, you can, you know, tell that's an old car, it's just kind of cool.
It's only 2 lanes.
This is Dave in front of the shop, and this is a famous, whoops. It was a big deal to get a famous surfer in town. This is a guy named Rory Russell, who was a famous guy from Pipeline in Hawaii. These are most of these are California guys that were on a tour for Lightning Bolt surfboards. This is Dave Skelton in Mexico. Brian Waters took the picture. Brian's sitting in a van covered up in the shade, and he snapped that picture of Dave. And Dave made that his theme, his logo shirt for years with Buck Surf Shop. Okay, so I'm just kind of focusing on different people. This is in front of that little teeny Interlight, or on the side of the little teeny Interlight shop. This was in the Gulf Breeze High School yearbook.
Peterson?
What?
Is that Peterson?
No.
Well, no. Well, this is Yancey here,
Oh, that's
and this is
Yancey.
Mark Fu. And Mark Fu is I'm just kind of highlighting some different interesting people that kind of added to our culture, sort of, and you know, based on our time here. So this is on the side of the surf shop, this little 10 by 10 shop. This was an ad in the yearbook. This is Mark Fu. Mark Fu, what's so interesting about Mark is he was living in Hawaii as a little kid, as a young teenager, and his dad was some kind of a ambassador or something within the military. He was some guy of importance, and they ended up transferring to Washington, D.C. And Mark was like 15 years old and going absolutely crazy because he loved surfing, and he couldn't handle living in D.C. Somehow, I don't know how he talked his parents into it, but somehow he made it to the coast of Delaware and Maryland. And a bunch of guys, for several summers, a lot of the Pensacola guys would go up to Delaware to go surf, like I mentioned earlier. And so they met this guy, I think in the summer of '73, Mark. He was living in like a condo that was unfinished, it was being built. He was sleeping underneath it and out surfing. He was just a total surfaholic. And so the guys embraced him, and they ended up bringing him down here, and he went to high school for a year and a half in Gulf Breeze. I think it was a year and a half. And this top picture is him in Pensacola. That was featured as a black and white in Surfer magazine. This is him a few years later when he moved to Hawaii. And these are some pictures of Mark. He became one of the most famous big wave riders in the world after living here for a couple years. He was just kind of an obnoxious kid when he lived here, very hyper. But when he went there, he became very serious. He got really fit. He would hound the photographers to death, which you need to do. He would come out, I'll meet you at Rocky Point or Pipeline or Sunset Beach, and you can take pictures and I'll surf. And so this is Mark up here in Surfer magazine. This is Yancey. That was actually in Panama City Beach. I think this might have been near 12th Avenue. And okay, this is up in Delaware. Do you have any idea who this is? What? Kathy Lee. Kathy Lee and her sister Mishi was, they had a summer home, their parents had a summer home in like, Dewey Beach, Rehoboth, Delaware. And all the surf guys got to know them. Kathy Lee and Yancey dated for a while, and then Mark, just being Mark, got to be friends with them. And so that's the rest is history there. This is the Gulf Breeze High Surf Club back in 1973 or 4. Whoops, sorry, I keep getting confused. This is JB looking the other way. This is me. This is Mark Fu, and this is a guy named Mike Stachow. Mike, sadly, he was a great guy. He passed away of like a stomach cancer or some kind of cancer back in around 85 or 6, which is so tragic. But anyway, so this is Mark. He was just being a goober kid. Okay, so when Mark moved to Hawaii, he was so aggressive with the photographers. Okay, look up here. This says Now Monthly. It was a really big deal in the surfing world for magazines to go not 2 months, but, oh, is it time? I gotta cut it off? Okay, okay. I'll go through this. I didn't know what you were waiting for.
I can talk to the people.
Also know when we've got a good speaker and we've got a good time.
We got prizes.
We have prizes. You know what? We've got water and cookies over here too. So if anybody is like dying, there's water and cookies here at the shop. And do you want to keep going?
I can do as long or as short as you want me to.
Well, do you want to go like another 10 minutes?
10 minutes will go.
30. Open your library card.
Like everybody else to keep going.
Up real fast.
We have a photo out here.
Come on, Tom, come on. We got some.
Okay.
I only saw one person leave, Tom.
Oh. Okay, so we got 10 minutes here. I'll go really quick. This Mark Fu got on the first issue of Surfer, the cover, when they went monthly. I think it was 1978. That was a huge deal. And this is J.B. Falbo. This was kind of an advertising special thing, but he made like a cover of that magazine. And that's J.B. Falbo, who grew up here. He was in Puerto Rico in that picture. This is Mark Fu, surfing Waimea Bay. He became a really famous big wave rider. Now, I think I have this right, I think it was December 23rd of 1994. I remember I was sitting in our house at a golf breeze, and Christmas was in the air, and we were just doing stuff, and it was fun and nice. I was just relaxing, and I remember Yancey called me. He was real somber, and he goes, "Tom, I heard that Mark Fu drowned." I went, "Whoa, what?" And what happened was Mark had surfed a big swell in Waimea Bay. Not saying this was the swell, I don't know, but he surfed a big swell in Waimea Bay, and the thing was back then to get on a plane, the red eye, and fly to California to a kind of a new break at the time called Mavericks up near Santa Cruz, where the water's really cold. Well, they flew all night, and I'm assuming Mark was tired. I don't know if he had anything to drink on the plane. I have no idea, but he went out surfing, and it was photographed the last wave he rode. He took off. It was a huge wave, but for him it wasn't. And I don't know if he fell and hit the bottom or the board hit him and broke or what, but he became so famous with that death. And Mark ironically made the comment in the Surf magazine. He said, in order to enjoy the ultimate thrill, you have to be willing to pay the ultimate price, and Mark did. And so it was in the New York Times. It was on one of the shows, the news shows, like not 60 Minutes, but one of those shows. I remember seeing it. It was Paul Harvey, if you remember him, he talked about it. And so it was very, very, there's pictures of him falling on his last wave. So that was a real tragedy. And so, but Mark's been a year and a half here. This is another surfing magazine, Mark, another cover of surfing magazine with Mark. Okay, we're gonna go quickly here. David Bogan, totally opposite of everyone else I'm talking about. But what's so significant about David Bogan is, this is at the bay in Fort Pickens. This is at Tavarua. If you look on, I asked Siri to help me get out to like Milton or something, and it showed up. It said the David Bogan Bridge. If you ever go across the bridge on I-10, it was destroyed during Ivan, and David was in charge as an engineer of that project, and so they named it after him. But David was an amazing guy who. Oh, there's his daughter, Joy. Yep, that's a sign.
And Dove, wave, Dove.
There's his wife, Dove.
Thank you all for coming.
The thing about David that's so significant that I don't know how many of you guys know this, but back in the day, forever in my young surfing life, there was a big plywood board painted white. When you walk to the pier, there's a little dune off just to the west, and it said no surfing within 300 feet of the pier. It was there forever, and no one paid attention to it. It was just like white noise. But every now and then, they would arrest people. And John Spencer told me, Pastor John Spencer told me one day he was out surfing, as a young guy, and he had to call his mom and go, Mom, I'm in jail. What did you do this time? So he got arrested for surfing. And so what would happen is they would arrest you and then didn't let you go and pay a fine or whatever. It was just silly because if there's no continuity whatsoever. And so what happened was sometime in the 90s, the city council, the county commissioners just said, look, let's just decide once and forever, is there going to be surfing or not at the pier? So all these surfers went to these council meetings, and surfers being surfers, they were being emotional, they were being belligerent, defiant, no way, you know, you can't take this away from us, and all this stuff. Well, David, unknown to all of us, quietly went. David was an engineer, he was very professional, and he went to each commissioner's office and sat down with them, person by person, and explained our fate, explained why, I don't know what he said, except that there was a guy named Tom Davis. And Tom Davis was a quadriplegic who had been in an accident at Alabama Point, and he got pitched and hit the sand really hard, and he bruised his spine, and he was a quadriplegic for 20 years. 2 weeks before his 21st birthday, I believe. So anyway, the final commissioner meeting, after David talked to everybody, and Tom came up in his wheelchair, and he told that, hey, surfers saved my life. And any of you that have surfed, most people, we're kind of like lifeguards out there anyway, because everyone's got their story about they help people get out of a rip current and all that. So because of David, really, we now have forever, we can surf next to the pier on the west side, night or day, winter, spring, summer, fall.
Put his picture back up
Okay,
again.
okay. See, okay, that's David in Tavarua in Fiji. That's David in high school. This is David as an adult, married to Doug. Okay, so not to say anything, not to make light of that, but now I'm going to jump to another person that was significant in Pensacola surfing. This is a guy named Larry Martin. And some of you guys know Larry, but Larry has surfed here forever. He's in his late 70s. He's dealing with some serious cancer. He told me he's probably surfed his last wave. But back in the day, do you know where this is? It's, yeah, China Beach near Da Nang in Vietnam. And Larry was drafted. I think he was drafted. I don't think he would have, no one back then volunteered to go to Vietnam, but he did. But what happened was he got a job there. This is surf in China Beach. This is him with Dana Delaney, who was, they made a TV show called China Beach. And he was a consultant. That's Larry right there. And he was on Good Morning America and all this stuff. And so, anyway, this is Larry skateboarding in Pensacola back in the mid-60s. This is Larry, you know, in Pensacola with his Islander surfboard. These are pictures of him and his buddies surfing in China Beach. And what happened, what's so amazing, is his time came up in the military, and he could go home and be free. But he re-enlisted to be in Vietnam so he could surf. And he said the only thing bad about it was there were sea snakes that were dangerous, but you just had to avoid them and you'd be fine. And he told me sometimes, like going back to this, that sometimes bullets would fly across from Vietnam, and they just stayed low-key. And so what happened was, Larry, this is Larry, is, you know, not, you know, 10 years ago or so. Well, Larry, they had this concession. I had pictures, I just didn't bring them. But he ran this concession stand. They had a place at China Beach. It was like an R&R place for all the troops to go just get out of the tension of the war. And he ran it. And so he would get up, and he lived somewhere in the jungle, and he would go on the road and hitchhike to work and get a ride in an army tank. And they'd take him to the beach, let him off, and he'd go do his thing. And he loved it. So anyway, so that brings us to a few more minutes. Brian Waters had a real significant role in Pensacola surfing. He, at Hutson Surf Shop, made Islander surfboards. And these are some pictures of Brian, some of his surfboard templates in the background. These are tennis courts that were at his parents' house, which was behind the surf shop. And Brian was a great craftsman. That's Brian. And this is Tom Frudiker, who's here tonight. And Robert Fink, who's here tonight. And let's see, Paul Henderson, Dave Skelton. Rick Settlemeyer, who passed away.
Mike Cassick.
Mike Cassick up here. Brian. Rick lived in Hawaii, and he died about 10 or so years ago, I think of heart failure or something very sad. This is Brian behind the surfboard factory with one of his boards. This is three friends, 50 years apart. This is a guy named Mike Bredesen, Brian Waters, and Dave Skelton. Brian Waters, I'm just
Brian Waters, Julie Skelton, and Mike Bredesen. And then this is Brian at work. This is Brian surfing. And notice the shape of that board is very similar to this shape. It's called an egg. Eggs are big. They're still big. These are some of the guys that work behind the surf shop. This is behind the surf shop there. It looks like it could be a Hutson Surfboard logo there. I don't know what he's drinking, but he's another guy that's significant is Charlie Schuler. Charlie Schuler was a teacher forever, and I've heard several of the kids that grew up said he was the best teacher they ever had, including a guy I know who went to architectural school in I think it was Harvard, and he said the best teacher ever had was Charlie. Charlie was an amazing guy, and he's still around. And this is him back in the 60s. This is him these days. He's still at 70 years old. He's still surfing hard. And so that's pretty unique to see a guy surfing that hard after 50 years or so. There are girls that surf here. This is Brenda Stokes at the U.S. Championships in 1974 in Hatteras. She placed in one of the top 5 in the whole country. This is Lisa Muir from Navarre. She's in the East Coast Hall of Fame. That's her again. These are the guys from Water. I think I'm almost at the end. These are the Water Boys guys, and all these guys had a dream. They started the shop, and now it's just Sean Fell, who is that Sean? No. Anyway, he's like the guy now who's got the shop. He's the sole guy. Oh, Buck Surf Shop. This is Jerry Blank right up here, and this is at the Benson Building. These are some of his friends. He was people like Jerry. Oh, our pier, our own pier. When I post pictures of the pier on social media, I get so much interest. But I don't know how it ever survived a storm. You could walk out here. Here's the men's room, but people would step over this and step over to here and watch the surf, and it was so cheesy. At the pier contest, Jerry Blank, Beezer, Yancey, Jerry Babin, whose dad owned the Dunes Motel in Pensacola Beach, which is now the Guardian Express, I think. John Spencer, JB Falbo. This is me, 73. But the reason I like this picture, not that you just see me, but you can see on the pier back then, the pier would be open. It would be closed, but it would be open. No one cared. You could just say, hey, everyone can hang out there in the winter. And there's no buildings back here. I love that. That's actually Gulf Breeze right here. So there's no boardwalk or anything. It's just so simple. I just love it. I love that, the simplicity of the old pier. Surf picture of the old pier. Surfers used to jump off the pier if you didn't want to paddle out. No one cared. That's your pier. That's Kevin Wood's brother. Kevin's here somewhere. Yeah, back here. And this is, for surfers, 1979 was a dividing line, kind of like BC and AD. In 1979, Hurricane Frederick came and it destroyed the sandbars, a lot of our sandbars, but especially the Point and Fort Pickens in the bay. This is a guy named Steve Horner on an epic day as Hurricane, Frederick in 79 was approaching us. This is a guy, oh, Ronnie, yeah, you took this picture from the Navy base, right? And you can't tell, but these waves, you're looking across the sound, these waves are breaking so much farther in than they normally would break because the surf is getting so huge. And this is probably the most colorful guy ever in Pensacola surfing. It's Kevin Wood's brother, Dirk. And just to show you, so those of you that don't surf, we do get big waves now and then. This is Dirk at Surfer Magazine. This is a guy named Ben Martin at the pier just before Thanksgiving a few years back. This was when Hurricane Katrina was coming. This is Yancey on the outside of the pier. And this is the last part. Some of those that have gone before us, and I don't have all of them, but I just grabbed a few. This is Binky Falbo, who was the older brother of JB and Jimmy Falbo. And Binky had epileptic seizures, and he was out in the water near 12th Avenue, and he was surfing, and he had a seizure, and he unfortunately died. Here's some of the guys that have passed on before us. And of course, Yancey and Mark Fu. This is Rick Settlemeyer, Ken Roos, a guy named Pat Bailey, Glenn Curl, Harry Allen, Sea Dog, David Bogan, Scott Calicott, Mark Stachow, Steve Robbins, and I have some more of these, but I don't know. But that's it. You guys made it.
What I thought might be nice, it's been suggested nice prizes here. So you brought a couple.
Kevin Woods donated those leashes, yeah.
Oh, so there's some leashes and then JB.
Yeah.
JB, you want to come on up?
Come on up.
Come on up. I'm gonna let JB draw for the, so if you didn't get a raffle ticket, can somebody get the raffle tickets out? Just if you didn't get one, grab a raffle ticket. And while we're doing this, while we're getting the people up here for the photo op, get your raffle ticket, get cookies and water, and then we'll have the drawing. So we'll try to do it real quick. Tom, this is your gift for speaking. You get 2 dozen homemade cookies. Let's give Tom another round of applause. And Dave Unit helped with getting the photos together. Thank you all so much for coming. I don't get to say hello to everybody. I think we have a very much of a record turnout.
I think we beat the UFOs.
Yeah, beat the UFOs. Does everybody have their raffle ticket ready?
Yes, we're ready, we're ready.
If you need one, get it quick, because Jamie's going to get the bag. All right. Okay, everybody has their ticket. Okay, JD's coming up to draw for the prizes, so find your ticket. And we'll just, well, they're kind of low numbers.
Last four.
Okay, we're gonna do, so we get a beach towel and a hat. Ticket number 0005.
Whoa!
That's Julie Connerly. Her mother had Guys and Dolls before our mother had Guys and Dolls department store. Who remembers that? Anybody remember the Guys and Dolls department store? And you were a certain age.
We've got a 7-foot leash donated by Kevin Woods. His brother, crazy brother, Dirk. 0054. Matt, you're good.
Okay, give him a round of applause. And one comment, if you didn't sign in tonight, could you just please sign in before you leave? Because we want to just have a head count, even though you put your initials or something, okay?
Okay, so we're going to give away a hat, a t-shirt, and a leash on this one. 0052. 0052.
He's got 52.
Somebody left too early.
Somebody got one? Who's got it?
Girls cancer!
Okay. All right, last we got a $50 gift card from Interlight. Donated by Lydia. No, I'm just kidding. 0016.
Thomas. Awesome volunteer.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So I think that's it. If you didn't get cookies or water, there's a basket over, and then there's some nuts and things. Oh, the photo. What happened to the photo op? If you were in this presentation, your name was mentioned, you were in this, please come up real quick and they want to take some photos. That would be awesome. Don't be shy. All right, what do we got? Come on up right now. Come on. All right, Scott's coming.
What's happening, Brian?
Hope you get some skills. Oh, here. Thank you.
We need a photo op.
Scott Shepard, Tom Frudiger, Robert King, who else is here?
I'm gonna let it roll.
Okay, folks, this is like herding cats. We need all those surfing cats up here for this group photo.
Now, you know cats don't Sorry about that.
Is that all?
What about that other surfboard? Hey, Tom, can we get the other surfboard in the front? Can we get the other surfboard in the front?
Thank you all for coming. Thanks so much.
Jody Brown, smile. Smile, Jody.
Hey, how are you?
Good, baby.
Hey, Diane. Hey, Diane. Hi, how have you been? Thank you for coming. And your mama. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. You won't break it, friend.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for coming.
I got a headache.